I'm going to show you how to tell if an oboe reed will play effectively. There can be obvious signs that an oboe reed won't play, but sometimes it just doesn't sound great and it's hard to tell why. Is it too open, too closed, cracked, or just old? I'll show you what to look for so that you can troubleshoot with your students and get those reeds working. So this reed is very difficult to blow and barely any sound comes out. You'll notice that it comes out in the upper register a tiny bit, and then when I'm getting down into the bottom of the octave, there's nothing. So this one is actually a really easy one, usually. Now, if you're really struggling to get any sound out, always check first to see whether it's cracked. So I will use a plaque, and that goes right in between the blades of the reed. Now, with a plaque, you should be able to see a crack. So if I put the plaque in, this one's really obvious. So there's just a crack right down the middle there. And that one is pretty big, so this reed is not going to function. Sometimes you might need to press gently, very gently, press the blade into the plaque to be able to find a crack, or perhaps move the plaque within the reed a little bit. With a crack like this reed needs to be discarded and start to play a new one. If there are little chips on the side of the reed in the corners, that could still be okay. The reed can play without those little corners, but a big crack down the center of a blade, that's not going to work. Toss it out, get a new one. So this reed is very difficult to get air through. It's playing sharp and it takes me a lot of effort just to get sound out of it. Looking at the reed, it is quite closed. So this reed's blades are not as curved as another reed's might be. So you can see that it's not very open at all. And obviously you've got less space to put that air if the reed is closing down. Now this is a brand new reed. It has not been played on at all, which means that the reed is not closing down because it's been used a whole lot. So what I'm going to do with a closed reed like this is I'm going to pinch either side of the reed just above the thread here. I'm going to be very gentle, but I'm going to pinch that together to see if I can start to open up the blades a little bit. It could be in the curvature of the blade. It could be that there's not a whole lot of curve in the blade, and that won't really, this won't really be effective if that's the case. It just might be that you have flat blades. But if you can kind of see a curve to the blades, then pinching here and squeezing a little bit might be very helpful. So I'm going to do that a bit. And while I'm doing that, I'm looking at the opening of the reed just to see what it does. Now I want to make sure that I'm not pushing too hard, because if I do push too hard and squeeze really tightly, I could just crack the blades. So I have to be gentle with what I'm doing. So let's see if that made a difference. So it's definitely easier to play. It's definitely more in tune. So that is an adjustment that you can try to make. I would do that yourself and not have a student do it. It might not be an overall fix or a long-lasting fix, but especially as we get into a season where it's less humid outside and more dry in your school building, that might be something you might need to do every once in a while with specific reeds. All right, so this reed is very loose feeling in my mouth. It's very easy to get sound out, but it's very difficult to control what that sound is. And it's registering very flat. This reed is playing really flat. So this is a brand new reed, and the first thing I would check for if it's that flat is a crack. So I'm gonna take a look. Now I know that it's not cracked because it's just out of the little coffin. So putting my plaque in the reed, and I'm just checking. Sometimes it's helpful to do this, at a light source, or if you take the plaque out and hold it up to the light, you can kind of see through the reed a little bit, so you can see if there's a crack there. This reed is not cracked, but it is incredibly open. So this is what the opening looks like. and it's just too open. And so I'm going to do kind of the opposite of what I did with the very closed up reed, is I'm going to kind of, well, first I'm going to make sure it's wet enough. So I'm going to go ahead and dunk that in the water for a few seconds, suck the excess moisture out. I am going to very, very gently, I'm going to pinch the tip. Now I know you're not supposed to touch the tip of the reed, but as a teacher, you can touch the tip of the reed. So I'm going to pinch, maybe pinch isn't the right word. I'm going to gently press my fingers together at the tip of the reed. And I'm hoping to close this down just a little bit. Now I could do that in other parts of the reed if I felt that was necessary. Sometimes down here in front of the thread, just like when we squeezed it open, we can kind of do the same thing there. Now this, like I said before, with the closed reed, it might have to do just with the curvature of the blades, so you might not be able to permanently change this reed, but we can at least do some pinching. So I'm doing pinching here above the thread, and I'm watching the opening, and it is bringing those blades together. So after a little bit of that, I'm going to try it again. Okay, so I'm still hearing the same kind of things. I'm still feeling the same kind of things with this reed, but it is a little bit sharper, so it is closer to being in tune. With a reed like this, that's something that I might do repeatedly. And I might also look at it more carefully in the light and see if maybe there are some places on the reed where the cane is just too thick. And I might do some adjustments with a reed knife to make it just a little bit easier to play and hopefully bring the pitch up. All right, so this reed has kind of a thin sound and a little bit muffled. This is quite an old reed. I have played on it for many hours, so I'm looking at the opening here, and I know that it's a little bit closed down. So with a reed that has been used a lot, has been played on for several hours, and maybe it's just old, you have purchased it several months ago, hopefully not years ago, but it's an older reed, they will start to close down, the sound will get thinner, they might go sharp, and honestly, there's not really a whole lot you can do for that reed. You might just need to get rid of it and start using a new one. But that's another reason that reeds might start to close. So if you feel like you have a very closed off reed, the opening is very, very closed, you want to think about or investigate with your students, how long has this reed been played for and when was it purchased? And if it's a brand new reed, you'll want to do some of the adjustments that we talked about earlier. But if it's quite an old reed, this might be the end of its life. These are just some of the things that can be wrong with an oboe reed. Hopefully these are the big ones that you'll encounter: cracked reeds, way open reeds, sometimes closed reeds, and probably old reeds. So if you are facing one of these situations, hopefully these little tips can help you and your students to get that reed working a little bit longer. Unfortunately, in some cases, it is just the end of that reed's life. Definitely if it's cracked, and probably if it's pretty old and has been played for a while. I know that some people determine the life of a reed by exactly how many hours it's been played. I don't necessarily go by that exactly, but I do keep track of how long a reed has been played. I rotate reeds, and I recommend that my students do the same, so that you're not playing on one reed for weeks and weeks and then it dies and then you have to start a new reed from scratch. I like to have at least 2 reeds in my rotation that I'm consistently playing. But I would teach your students early on to notice any changes in their sound. So if they're practicing at home and all of a sudden their reed feels really difficult to blow, or it's really flat or really sharp, or it just sounds dead, those are issues that you want the students to bring to you so that you can figure out what's going on with that reed. Check back here for more beginning band content next Wednesday. Until next time.